Mom, why does the man on TV have my eyes? The question drifted through the warm evening air like a pebble dropped into still water, small and innocent, yet powerful enough to change everything. Evelyn Hart stood frozen in the doorway of her modest Brooklyn townhouse, a basket of freshly folded laundry resting against her hip as her 6-year-old son pointed toward the television screen. The golden light of sunset streamed through the living room windows, painting the walls in shades of amber and honey. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. On the screen, surrounded by flashing cameras and reporters, stood Grayson Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Dominion, one of the largest technology empires in America. His tailored navy suit reflected the lights of the Manhattan charity gala he was attending, his calm confidence commanding every eye in the room. Millions of people knew his name. Millions admired his success. But only one little boy stared at him with quiet recognition. Lucas sat cross-legged on the rug, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he tilted his head. Beside him, his younger brother Ethan looked up curiously from a pile of building blocks, while Claire and Sophie shared a coloring book on the couch. For children, for beautiful miracles, for secrets Evelyn had protected with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her heart tightened as Lucas pointed again. "Look, Mom. His smile is like mine." The television volume seemed louder now. A reporter asked Grayson about his company's newest children's hospital initiative. He answered with the same composed authority that had made him famous. Yet Evelyn barely heard the words. She was too busy staring at a face she had spent 6 years trying to forget, or perhaps 6 years trying to remember, because memory had a strange way of softening pain and polishing regret until it shimmered like distant light. The children returned to their games, unaware of the storm gathering inside their mother. Evelyn slowly set the laundry basket down and lowered herself into an armchair near the window. Outside, autumn leaves drifted along the sidewalk as neighbors walked their dogs beneath the fading sunlight. Everything looked ordinary, peaceful, safe, yet her pulse refused to slow. On the coffee table sat a small wooden box she had not opened in years. Hidden inside was a silver watch. Elegant, timeless, forgotten, or perhaps left behind by fate itself. She knew every scratch on its surface, every detail, because it was the only proof that one extraordinary night had truly happened. 6 years ago, before the children, before the sleepless nights and birthday parties and school lunches, there had been a gala in Manhattan. A room filled with crystal chandeliers and soft jazz music. A stranger with thoughtful eyes and a quiet smile. A conversation that felt less like meeting someone and more like remembering them. She had never learned the full truth about him. Not then, not afterward. Life had moved too quickly. Circumstances had closed doors before either of them could understand what destiny had opened. Yet now his face filled her living room television screen, while for children played beneath it. For children who carried his eyes, his smile, his expressions, and perhaps even pieces of his heart without ever knowing his name. Lucas suddenly looked back toward her. "Mom." Evelyn blinked. "Yes, sweetheart." The little boy smiled. "I think someday I want to meet him." Outside, the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the city skyline. Inside, Evelyn felt a chill she could not explain. Because deep down, for the first time in 6 years, she sensed something impossible. The story she believed was finished had only just begun. The wooden box remained on the coffee table long after the children had gone upstairs for the night. Evelyn sat alone in the quiet living room, listening to the gentle ticking of the old wall clock and the distant hum of traffic drifting through Brooklyn streets. Moonlight spilled across the hardwood floor in silver ribbons, illuminating the box she had spent years avoiding. Slowly, she reached forward and lifted the lid. The silver watch rested exactly where she had left it, its polished surface softened by time. Her fingertips brushed the cool metal, and suddenly the years between then and now seemed to disappear. Manhattan, 6 years earlier. The city had glittered beneath a spring sky, every skyscraper reflecting thousands of lights like stars trapped in glass. Evelyn had almost skipped the charity gala that night. She had just completed a difficult pediatric residency rotation and planned to spend the evening catching up on sleep. But her closest friend insisted she attend. "You spend all your time taking care of everyone else," she had said. "Tonight, just enjoy being Evelyn." The ballroom occupied the top floor of one of Manhattan's most prestigious hotels. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like floating constellations, scattering golden light across polished marble floors. Soft jazz drifted through the room while guests in elegant evening attire mingled beneath towering floral arrangements. For the first hour, Evelyn felt completely out of place among billionaires, celebrities, and corporate leaders. She smiled politely, accepted a sparkling water from a passing server, and quietly observed the crowd. That was when she noticed him. He stood alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Unlike everyone else, he seemed uninterested in being seen. There was no entourage surrounding him, no reporters, no obvious signs of wealth despite the impeccable tailoring of his dark suit. He simply watched the city below as though searching for answers hidden among the lights. Something about his solitude felt familiar. Evelyn found herself walking toward the windows before she realized what she was doing. The stranger glanced over as she approached. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled. It was not the practiced smile of a businessman. It was genuine, warm, unexpected. Beautiful view, he said. Evelyn looked out across the city. It makes everything feel smaller. His expression deepened with amusement. Most people say it makes them feel bigger. Maybe that is the problem. He laughed softly. The sound carried a rare sincerity that immediately put her at ease. What began as a simple exchange became an effortless conversation. They talked about childhood dreams, favorite books, places they hoped to visit someday. They spoke about purpose instead of success, fulfillment instead of achievement. Hours seemed to disappear without either noticing. For the first time in months, Evelyn forgot about work, deadlines, and responsibilities. She simply enjoyed the presence of someone who listened carefully and answered honestly. As midnight approached, the crowd around them gradually thinned. Beyond the glass, Manhattan shimmered beneath a sea of lights. The stranger removed his watch and checked the time before slipping it back onto his wrist. "I should probably get going," he said quietly. Evelyn felt an unexpected disappointment. Strange how someone could feel familiar after only a few hours. He looked at her for a long moment, as though debating whether to say something more. Before either of them could speak, his phone vibrated. The expression in his eyes shifted instantly. Concern, urgency, duty. He glanced at the screen and exhaled. Whatever message had arrived clearly changed everything. Neither of them knew that within hours fate would pull them in opposite directions. Neither understood that this single evening would become the beginning of a story neither could escape. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale gray clouds and uncertainty. Evelyn woke before sunrise in a quiet hotel room overlooking the East River, still carrying the strange warmth of the previous evening. For a few peaceful moments, she simply watched the city awaken beyond the window. Ferries crossed the water. Streetlights faded one by one. Manhattan seemed softer in the early light, as though the city itself was reluctant to face another demanding day. She glanced toward the nightstand where a folded card rested beside a glass of water. There was no name written on it, no phone number, only a brief message in neat handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me what matters." The words made her smile. Their conversation had lasted only a few hours, yet it felt oddly significant. Not because of romance, not because of grand promises, but because for the first time in years, someone had spoken to her without asking what she could accomplish or what she could provide. He had simply wanted to know who she was. Later that morning, Evelyn returned to Brooklyn and immersed herself in work. Children needed treatment plans. Families needed reassurance. Life moved forward with relentless speed. Days turned into weeks. Occasionally, she found herself wondering about the stranger from the gala, but each time she pushed the thought aside. Some people entered your life for a single chapter, she told herself. Not every story was meant to continue. Then, 6 weeks later, everything changed. The late afternoon sun streamed through the pediatric clinic windows as Evelyn reviewed patient files. A wave of dizziness suddenly forced her to sit down. At first, she blamed exhaustion. The previous month had been unusually demanding, yet the fatigue lingered. Then came the nausea. Then the realization she could no longer ignore. 2 days later, she sat alone in a medical office staring at a monitor screen while a technician studied the results with growing surprise. Silence filled the room. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. The technician blinked and looked back at her with a gentle smile. "Everything is more than all right." Evelyn frowned. "What does that mean?" The woman turned the screen slightly. It means you are not expecting one baby. Evelyn's breath caught. Not one. The technician shook her head. Not two either. A nervous laugh escaped before Evelyn could stop it. Please tell me you are joking. The woman smiled wider. I am not joking. She pointed carefully toward the screen. You are carrying 4 healthy babies. The room seemed to disappear. 4. The number echoed through her mind again and again. For heartbeats. For tiny lives. For impossible miracles. Tears gathered in her eyes before she even realized she was crying. Not from fear. Not from sadness. From sheer disbelief. She placed a trembling hand against her chest as emotions collided inside her. Questions. Uncertainty. Wonder. Hope. The future she had imagined only days earlier vanished completely, replaced by something extraordinary and terrifying at the same time. Outside the clinic, evenings settled over the city. Cars moved through busy intersections. People hurried home from work. The world continued exactly as it always had. Yet for Evelyn Hart, everything had changed forever. And somewhere across Manhattan, a man named Grayson Vale had no idea that 4 tiny heartbeats had already begun rewriting the course of his life. The months that followed tested Evelyn in ways she had never imagined. Winter arrived early that year, wrapping Brooklyn in icy winds and silver skies. While most people hurried through their routines, she learned to measure time differently. Time became doctor appointments, nursery plans, medical charts, and 4 tiny heartbeats that grew stronger with every passing week. Some nights, she sat beside her apartment window watching snow drift beneath streetlights, while a stack of pediatric journals rested untouched on the table beside her. Her future no longer belonged only to her, for lives depended on every decision she made. Friends offered advice. Family members offered concern. More than once, someone gently suggested that she try to find the children's father. Each time, Evelyn simply smiled and changed the subject. She had no name, no phone number, no certainty beyond a single unforgettable evening and a silver watch resting safely inside a wooden box. Life moved forward anyway. Spring eventually replaced winter, and with it came a season of extraordinary change. The day the babies arrived, soft rain tapped against hospital windows while gray clouds drifted across the New York skyline. Evelyn held each child in her arms and felt the world rearrange itself. Lucas came first, quiet and observant from the beginning. Claire followed with bright eyes that seemed determined to study everything around her. Ethan arrived with surprising energy, announcing his presence with remarkable enthusiasm. Sophie came last, peaceful and calm, her tiny fingers wrapping around Evelyn's hand as though offering reassurance instead of seeking it. For cribs soon filled a small apartment that suddenly felt impossibly crowded and wonderfully alive. Sleep became a luxury. Silence became rare. Yet despite the challenges, joy appeared in countless unexpected moments. First smiles, first laughs, tiny footsteps, bedtime stories read beneath warm lamplight, family photographs taped to the refrigerator. Every milestone felt like a miracle multiplied by 4. Years passed with astonishing speed. Evelyn balanced motherhood and medicine through determination, discipline, and endless cups of coffee. She accepted a position at a respected children's clinic closer to home, allowing her to spend more time with the children. Money was often tight, but love never was. Their townhouse overflowed with laughter, artwork taped to walls, school projects scattered across tables, and memories woven into every corner. As the children grew older, certain details became impossible to ignore. Lucas shared the same thoughtful gaze as the stranger from the gala. Claire possessed his calm confidence. Ethan carried his natural leadership. Sophie inherited his quiet ability to make others feel seen. Sometimes Evelyn caught glimpses of those familiar traits and felt an ache she could never fully explain. Not regret, not sadness. Simply curiosity about a path life had never allowed her to explore. One afternoon shortly before Lucas turned 6, the children discovered the wooden box while helping clean the living room. Sophie carefully lifted the silver watch and stared at its polished surface. "Was this Grandpa's?" she asked. Evelyn hesitated before taking the watch and holding it gently in her palm. Sunlight reflected across the glass, scattering tiny beams across the room. "No," she answered softly. "It belonged to someone I met a long time ago." Lucas looked up from the floor. "Someone important?" Evelyn studied the watch for a moment before smiling. Very important. She placed it back inside the box and closed the lid. None of them realized that somewhere across the East River, the owner of that watch was about to step into their lives again. And when he did, the carefully protected world Evelyn had built would never be the same. The reunion arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning disguised as routine. Evelyn stood in the pediatric clinic reviewing patient schedules while sunlight streamed through the reception windows. The waiting room buzzed with familiar sounds, parents speaking softly, children turning pages in picture books, nurses moving efficiently through hallways. Everything felt normal until the clinic director hurried into the staff lounge carrying a tablet and an expression of excitement. "Everyone, we have important visitors coming this afternoon," she announced. Vale Dominion just finalized a major partnership with our hospital network. Their foundation is funding a new pediatric research wing. The room erupted with surprise. Even Evelyn recognized the significance of the announcement. The Vale Foundation had become one of the largest supporters of children's health care in the country. New equipment, expanded treatment programs, and family assistance services would change thousands of lives. "The founder himself will be here," the director added. "Please make sure everything is ready." Evelyn's hand froze around her coffee cup. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She immediately dismissed it as coincidence. New York was full of powerful people. There was no reason to think about a stranger from 6 years ago. Yet throughout the morning, she found herself distracted. By noon, photographers and administrators had begun arriving. Fresh flowers decorated the lobby. Reporters gathered outside. The clinic seemed transformed by anticipation. Meanwhile, across town, Lucas, Claire, Ethan, and Sophie participated in a special children's wellness event organized by the hospital. Their elementary school had been invited to attend, and the children were thrilled by the opportunity to miss an afternoon of regular classes. Shortly after 2 o'clock, a line of black vehicles pulled up outside the clinic entrance. Cameras flashed. Staff members gathered near the lobby. Evelyn remained focused on her patients, determined to avoid the distraction. Then she heard a familiar voice. Deep, calm, instantly recognizable despite the passing years. Her heart stopped. Slowly, she turned toward the hallway entrance. Grayson Vale stepped into view surrounded by executives and hospital officials. Time seemed to fold inward. He looked older than she remembered, more confident, more accomplished, yet unmistakably the same man from the gala. For a brief second, neither noticed the other. Grayson listened attentively as administrators explained future projects. Then movement near the wellness event caught his attention. For children rushed through the activity area carrying colorful paper windmills they had made earlier that afternoon. Lucas laughed as Ethan challenged him to a race. Claire reminded both boys not to run indoors. Sophie followed behind, trying to keep everyone together. Grayson watched them pass. Something changed in his expression. He frowned slightly, not from concern, from recognition. Lucas glanced up while running and accidentally locked eyes with him. The little boy slowed immediately. Grayson felt an unexpected jolt. The child's eyes looked strangely familiar. Then Claire smiled while helping Sophie fix a torn ribbon. Again, a feeling he could not explain settled over him. One child resembling a stranger could be coincidence. Two felt unusual. Four felt impossible. Evelyn stepped into the hallway at that exact moment. Her gaze met Grayson's across the crowded clinic. The noise around them faded. Cameras, conversations, reporters. Everything disappeared beneath the weight of 6 lost years. Grayson stared at her, unable to hide his shock. Evelyn stood motionless, her pulse racing. Neither spoke, yet both understood one thing instantly. Fate had just reopened a door neither of them had expected to see again. For several long seconds, neither Evelyn nor Grayson moved. The hallway remained crowded with doctors, donors, reporters, and hospital administrators, yet the distance between them felt strangely private. 6 years vanished beneath a single glance. Grayson was the first to recover. His expression softened with disbelief before settling into something quieter, something careful. "Evelyn?" he asked. Hearing her name in his voice after so many years sent an unexpected ache through her chest. She managed a small nod. "Hello, Grayson." Around them, conversations continued, cameras flashed, and officials discussed funding initiatives, but neither seemed capable of focusing on anything except the impossible reality standing before them. Before either could say more, a small voice interrupted. Mom. Lucas appeared beside Evelyn, holding one of the colorful paper windmills. Claire, Ethan, and Sophie followed close behind. The children stopped when they noticed the tall stranger standing beside their mother. Grayson looked down. The strange feeling he had experienced earlier returned with even greater force. Lucas studied him openly. Ethan tilted his head. Claire offered a polite smile. Sophie quietly held her sister's hand. For children. For faces. For reflections of details Grayson recognized without understanding why. These are your children? He asked gently. Evelyn nodded. Yes. Something in her tone made him pause. The answer sounded simple, yet somehow incomplete. Lucas stepped forward with the fearless curiosity only children possess. You are the man from television, he announced. Several adults nearby laughed softly. Grayson smiled. I suppose I am. I knew it, Lucas said proudly. I told Mom you have eyes like mine. The words landed with unexpected weight. Evelyn immediately looked away. Grayson felt a strange tension settle over the moment. He studied the boy more carefully. The resemblance was not exact, yet something felt undeniably familiar. Before he could examine the thought further, hospital staff approached to continue the scheduled tour. Reluctantly, Grayson followed them through the research wing. Yet throughout the afternoon, he found his attention drifting back toward Evelyn and the children. During presentations, he caught himself searching crowded rooms for them. During interviews, he remembered details from 6 years ago that he had not thought about in ages. The way Evelyn listened. The way she spoke about helping children. The way she had made him forget board meetings, shareholder battles, and corporate responsibilities for a single unforgettable evening. As the event concluded, Grayson made a decision. He found Evelyn near the reception area while the children gathered their belongings. Would you allow me to help support the kids' education fund? He asked. The foundation offers scholarships and family assistance programs. I would be happy to arrange everything. Evelyn's expression remained calm. That is generous, but it is not necessary. Grayson seemed surprised. Very few people declined help from the Vail Foundation. You do not even want to hear the details? Evelyn smiled politely. I appreciate the offer. Truly. But my children are cared for. Her answer carried no pride, no hostility, no resentment. Only dignity. The same quiet strength he remembered from years earlier. For reasons he could not explain, her refusal impressed him more than gratitude ever could have. Most people saw his wealth first. Evelyn never had. Even now, she stood before one of the most powerful men in America and treated him exactly as she had 6 years ago, simply as another human being. As she gathered the children and prepared to leave, Sophie suddenly stopped and looked at Grayson. You seem lonely, she said softly. The adults froze. Grayson blinked. Do I? Sophie nodded. Sometimes people smile when they are sad. Evelyn gently guided her daughter forward, clearly embarrassed. Yet Grayson's gaze remained fixed on the little girl. Because for the first time in many years, someone had looked past the empire, the headlines, and the success. And somehow, a 6-year-old child had seen the truth. The encounter should have ended at the hospital, yet neither Evelyn nor Grayson could leave it behind. 3 days later, rain drifted across Manhattan in a soft silver curtain as Grayson sat alone in his office overlooking the city. Quarterly reports covered his desk. Acquisition proposals waited for review. His calendar remained packed from sunrise until evening. Yet his attention kept returning to 4 children and 1 woman. He replayed every moment from the hospital visit. Lucas's eyes, Claire's quiet confidence, Ethan's energy, Sophie's unusual perception. Most of all, he remembered Evelyn's calm refusal. She had asked for nothing, expected nothing. 6 years earlier, she had disappeared from his life without explanation. Now she had returned carrying mysteries he could not ignore. Across Brooklyn, Evelyn sensed the same storm approaching. She stood in her kitchen preparing dinner while the children completed homework around the dining table. The townhouse glowed with warmth. Tomato soup simmered on the stove. Family photographs lined the walls. It was the life she had spent years building. Yet every ring of her phone now made her heart hesitate. Every unexpected email made her pause. She knew Grayson was asking questions. Powerful people always found answers eventually. The only uncertainty was how long it would take. Late Friday afternoon, a black sedan stopped outside the townhouse. Grayson stepped onto the sidewalk carrying no assistance, No security team, and no reporters. Only a small paper bag from a neighborhood bakery. When Evelyn opened the door, surprise flashed across her face. "You found us." Grayson smiled slightly. "Brooklyn is not as large as it seems." Before she could respond, four excited voices echoed from inside. The children rushed into the hallway. Lucas immediately recognized him. "You came back." Grayson looked down at the boy. "I said I might visit." Ethan noticed the bakery bag first. "Is that pie?" Grayson laughed. "Apple pie." "Then you can come in," Ethan declared. The decision appeared settled. For the next hour, something unexpected happened. Grayson forgot he was a billionaire. He sat at the dining table helping Claire with a math problem. He listened to Sophie explain why birds probably enjoyed sunsets. He watched Ethan attempt to balance 3 crayons on his nose. He joined Lucas in building a model bridge from wooden blocks. The townhouse filled with laughter. Genuine laughter. The kind that never appeared in boardrooms or shareholder meetings. At one point, Grayson noticed a framed photograph on a nearby shelf. It showed Evelyn holding 4 newborn babies. Beside the frame sat a familiar wooden box. His pulse quickened. "May I?" he asked quietly. Evelyn followed his gaze and immediately understood. The room seemed to grow still. Slowly, she opened the box and lifted the silver watch. Grayson stared at it in disbelief. "I looked for this." His voice was barely above a whisper. "For years." Evelyn placed the watch in his hand. "I never knew where to send it." Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Across the room, Lucas looked between them with growing curiosity. Then the boy asked the question both adults had feared and expected. "Mom," he said softly, "how do you know him?" Silence settled over the townhouse. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, Evelyn felt her carefully protected world standing at the edge of a truth that could no longer remain hidden. The question lingered in the room like a suspended breath. Lucas looked from his mother to Grayson, waiting patiently for an answer. Claire lowered her pencil. Ethan stopped reaching for another slice of pie. Even Sophie seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. Evelyn glanced toward the rain-speckled window before returning her gaze to her son. For years she had prepared herself for this moment. Yet now that it had arrived, the words felt unexpectedly fragile. "A long time ago," she said gently, "Mr. Vale and I met at a charity event in Manhattan." Lucas nodded as though processing an important piece of a puzzle. "Before we were born?" "Yes," Evelyn replied softly. "Long before." Grayson remained silent. The silver watch rested in his palm, heavier now than it had ever felt before. He studied the children sitting around the table and felt a growing certainty that refused to be ignored. The resemblance, the timing, the unanswered questions that suddenly connected into a single possibility. Later that evening, after the children had gone upstairs, Evelyn and Grayson stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The rain had stopped. Streetlights cast warm pools of gold across the sidewalk outside. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Grayson broke the silence. "Evelyn, I need to ask something." She looked at him calmly. "I know." His jaw tightened slightly. "The children." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Are they mine?" The question hung between them. There was no anger in his voice. No accusation. Only hope and fear woven together. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly before answering. "I never wanted to tell you this under pressure." Grayson waited. "But yes," she said quietly. "They are." The world seemed to stop. Grayson stared at her, unable to speak. For 6 years he had believed his life was complete. He had built companies, created foundations, appeared on magazine covers, and accumulated more success than most people could imagine. Yet in a single sentence, everything he thought he knew about his future changed. For children. For lives connected to his own. For years of birthdays he had missed. For first words he had never heard. For small hands he had never held. He slowly sat down at the kitchen table. Emotion crossed his face with a vulnerability few people had ever witnessed. "Why did you never tell me?" Evelyn lowered herself into the chair across from him. "Because I could not find you." She gestured toward the watch. "That was all I had." Grayson looked down at the silver timepiece. 6 years earlier, an emergency board crisis had pulled him away from the gala before dawn. In the chaos that followed, he had searched for Evelyn but found no trace of her. Neither had known how to reach the other. Fate had separated them with astonishing efficiency. "I never stopped wondering about you," he admitted. Evelyn smiled sadly. "Neither did I." The next morning brought answers neither of them could avoid. At Grayson's request, a confidential legal and medical verification process was arranged. Days later, the results arrived. The report confirmed what both already knew in their hearts. There was no uncertainty, no ambiguity. Lucas, Claire, Ethan, and Sophie were his children. The news remained private for less than 48 hours. Somehow, information leaked. By the end of the week, headlines exploded across business networks and social media. Reporters camped outside corporate headquarters. Financial analysts speculated endlessly. Shareholders demanded explanations. The revelation sent shockwaves through every corner of Grayson's carefully controlled world. Yet none of that compared to the challenge waiting inside the boardroom. Because while the public celebrated the discovery of 4 heirs, not everyone inside Vale Dominion welcomed the news. The boardroom on the 48th floor of Vale Dominion overlooked a city wrapped in morning light. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed miles of glass towers and busy streets below, but Grayson barely noticed the view. Around the polished conference table sat investors, executives, and legal advisors, each carrying opinions about the headlines that had dominated the previous week. Some worried about public perception, others worried about succession plans, a few worried about stock prices. Grayson listened quietly until the discussion finally ended. Then he stood. The room fell silent. For years, he said calmly, I believe success was measured by growth charts, acquisitions, and market value. Last week reminded me that I was wrong. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. Grayson continued, The 4 children the world is discussing are not a public relations challenge. They are my family. No one spoke, and I will not allow anyone to treat them as a problem to be solved. The meeting ended shortly afterward. By evening, a public statement confirmed what mattered most. Grayson acknowledged his children with pride, requested privacy for their well-being, and announced a major expansion of the Vale Foundation's pediatric initiatives. The response surprised even the most skeptical analysts. Public support surged. Donations increased. Families across the country praised the decision. Yet the greatest change was happening far from television cameras. Over the following months, Grayson became a regular presence in Brooklyn. He attended school events, helped with science projects, learned bedtime routines, discovered that Ethan asked hundreds of questions every day, learned that Claire loved astronomy, learned that Lucas wanted to design bridges when he grew up, learned that Sophie believed every person carried a hidden story worth hearing. None of it felt like obligation. It felt like coming home to a place he had somehow been missing all along. Evelyn watched the transformation carefully. She never rushed it, never demanded promises. She simply allowed relationships to grow naturally. The same patience that had carried her through 6 years of motherhood guided her now. Spring eventually returned to New York. Cherry blossoms appeared throughout the city, painting parks in shades of soft pink and white. On a bright Saturday morning, hundreds of guests gathered outside a newly completed children's hospital funded by the expanded foundation. Families, doctors, nurses, and community leaders filled the courtyard. A large silk curtain covered the building's dedication plaque. Reporters waited nearby, though the atmosphere felt more hopeful than sensational. Grayson stood beside Evelyn and the children beneath the warm sunlight. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. When the moment arrived, Lucas, Claire, Ethan, and Sophie stepped forward together. For small hands reached for the ribbon attached to the curtain. As they pulled, the fabric slipped away, revealing the inscription beneath. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Yet Grayson's attention remained fixed on the children. Evelyn looked at them too. 6 years earlier, she had faced an uncertain future carrying 4 tiny heartbeats. Now those same miracles stood smiling beneath a clear blue sky, surrounded by people who loved them. Sophie slipped her hand into Grayson's. Ethan wrapped an arm around Lucas. Claire leaned gently against Evelyn. For a moment, nobody spoke. They simply stood together in the sunlight. The city moved around them. The future waited ahead. And Grayson finally understood something success had never taught him. The greatest legacy was never the empire he built. It was the family that had found its way back to him.